We are live.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Good to be here. How are you doing, Dina?
I am doing wonderful. How are you doing?
Doing really well. I was just saying to you before we hit the go live button, it's beautiful and magical, fluffy snowflakes outside here. So I'm uh, I'm vibing with it, and I like it.
I love that. Oh, that's so exciting. I love the way that just soft snow just looks. It is magical. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Awesome. So
So
today, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
um, Yeah, so today we wanted to bring a little bit of kind of what's been on our hearts and what we've been sitting with and experiencing in our own journeys in our businesses and walking with Christ in our businesses. And when you and I spoke briefly about that yesterday, something that has come up really strongly as a theme for both of us is the concepts of sowing and reaping.
Mm-hmm.
And for me in particular, the phase within that where you're sowing seeds, but then you need to let the seeds take root. You need to give them space and time to actually, start to shoot out and grow down and get tall and all of these things that we know in nature are so required for
Mm-hmm.
healthy crop. And yet sometimes that can feel a little bit difficult to do in the context of our businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, a lot of times we maybe get tired or
Mm-hmm.
we feel like, oh, I mean, is it working? you know, and we've all been there, right? If you've been there, put an emoji below and share that you've been there. And really, Paul in Galatians 6, he talks about, let us not become weary in doing good, and at the proper time we will actually reap our harvest if we don't give up. And when we're navigating life and business, it's really easy to become frustrated when we're
Mm-hmm.
not really seeing the fruits of our labor like as fast as we want to see it. And let's talk a little bit about us being a society that really likes our instant gratification, right? We're so used to this dopamine fix and getting what we want when we want it. I mean, now we DoorDash our food. We have Amazon deliver things to our house. Like, we are in a society where we can easily get what it is that we want really, really quickly. And so, being in that momentum when we're waiting for God's timing, sometimes we get a little frustrated when we're like, well, our timing, we want it, now. But in God's perfect timing, in His way, it is higher than ours. And sometimes we need a little reminder about that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. And I had this conversation with another person yesterday as well. Like, it's really been a theme. And it's interesting because on Sunday, the pastor at the church that I would go to was talking about the season of rest and how, naturally in our bodies, winter is a time of rest. Like, the rest of nature really takes a break and hibernates, or the trees lose their leaves and everything goes into a bit of a dormant state. But because we have been conditioned to always be producing, always be working, always be making things happen, and always expecting things, like you said, to show up yesterday, um, the discomfort that often arises within us at this in the experience of dormancy or rest, it really creates a lot of tension and discomfort for people. And often I have noticed people will actually misuse, in my opinion, biblical principles to justify their overworking.
Mm, how so?
And
Like, give me an
um,
example. Because
yeah,
I think that's
so
common for us. Yeah.
I think so. Excuse me, I'm still, speaking of rest, still getting rid of that cold. Um, so one thing that I've seen people refer to often is this idea of like reaping what you sow, but pushing that in so far as to say, like, if you're not always sowing, if you ever were to sow a day of laziness, which could also be considered rest, that all you're going to reap is emptiness, or the idea of slothfulness being sinful, right? That laziness is sinful, but taking that so far to the opposite extreme that there isn't actually personal discernment between, well, what is laziness, what is slothfulness, and what is rest, which
like
is actually
biblical rest. Yeah.
Being necessary, right? You know the people and the stories a little better than I do, but one thing that has really stuck with me over the last few months was I was reading some scripture, and one of the people was saying, they were saying to Jesus, like, I can't hear God anymore. And eat something and go sleep. And they did. And then he said, eat more and go sleep more. And they did. And at the end of this cycle of eating and resting and caring for their physical needs and giving themselves space to rest, this person was able to hear God again. It wasn't because they couldn't hear God or that they had lost God or that God had abandoned them in their journey. It was because they had been pushing so hard. And that's what I think we get caught up in.
Yeah.
Is that we push so hard.
Yeah.
We lose the ability to hear and feel God. Like day to day, moment to moment.
Yeah. And there's a reason for that. There's when if you go back to Genesis and you read the part where first Eve eats the apple, right? But the ultimate sin came when Adam ate the apple, because Adam was directly under God and God instructed him to obey, and then he disobeyed, so that brought the sin. And in there was the enemy was using lies and his steal, kill, and destroy tactics that he really does not change. That is how he operates, right? And that is his nature. And so in that moment where God comes and he finds Adam and Adam's hiding, God talks about the curse, the earth curse in there. And in there, it basically says, because you disobeyed me, you will now toil the ground. You will basically work, and it will never feel like enough. And that is really where that earth curse comes from. And a lot of people get stuck in that cycle of the earth curse because they don't realize when Jesus came, he canceled that curse out. And so we have the ability to take that rest and to enjoy the rest once we have that faith that everything was done on the cross by Jesus. And so that canceled that curse. And so that curse is no more. But we have to walk in faith to exercise our inheritance to not have to live that curse out. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. And I can see how that applies so much in your business, but really just in your life.
Yeah.
Right? In one thing that often comes up when we're talking about business is parenting, because the two overlap so much.
Totally.
It's so easy to feel like you're never doing enough for your kids, like you're never doing enough to grow your company, like you're never doing enough for your spouse. Because if we get really tied down and bogged down in the muck, there is always more to do. But if that's all you let yourself see, you end up in that work and work and work, and it never feels like enough. But the moment you can lean back, find some ease in yourself, and know that actually exactly what's happened now, exactly where you are now, exactly who you are now in Christ is already enough. It changes every action you take from one of grasping to one of receiving. And there's an inherent ease that comes in with that, to the point that it actually makes you more productive, because your actions are so inspired and so aligned by what God has for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and think about how you're exercising your kingdom wisdom too. Like your divine gifting is coming into play as well. You've got the discernment, you've got the knowing, you've got the ability to teach, the wisdom, and all that comes into play when you're aligned correctly in your spiritual gifting as well. So you don't have to work as hard. You don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, I have to do this all by myself. No, you get all the abundance of God's creation and all the who's you can think of to come and lift and support you in whatever it is that you're doing. And the cool thing is once he lays those, I mean, you're knit in your mother's womb for a purpose and for a time like this, as scripture says, right? And so all that is knitted into your DNA. He put all those dreams and desires into you before you took your first breath. And so in knowing that, know that there is the perfect team of people, the perfect energy, the perfect light, the amount of angels to help support you in that whole purpose that he has created you for. All of heaven goes to work on your behalf, which is so cool. And all it takes is the faith of a mustard seed to exercise that and to make it come to fruition. Yeah. And so, like, thinking of like reaping and sowing, one of the things that I love to share, and my mentor taught me this, and she's like, think about what it is that you're sowing. What seeds do you sow? When I speak life into another human, I get to reap that benefit, right? Because I have sown into somebody else, now I get to reap. So think about all the things that you say to other people. Are you reaping good seeds, or are you sowing good seeds, or are you sowing bad seeds? Because when you speak death and destruction into somebody, you're gonna reap that as well. And so, like she says, my mentor, she'd say, if I plant corn, what do I get? Corn. If I plant wheat, what do I get?
Wheat.
If I plant peas, what do I get?
Peas.
If I plant peas, am I ever going to get corn?
Unlikely.
No, not unless something cross-pollinates, right? Like the likelihood, no, right? So I'm only going to get back what I put in. And so if you know that, and this is how the law works, it's the law of reaping and sowing, right? If you know how that law works, could you find yourself sowing more goodness, more blessing, more benefit, more empowerment, more learning, more humility? What will you sow?
A way that I heard this put recently that I really liked was, because one thing that I find happens with people sometimes is if we, and you and I talked about this a bit yesterday, even if we are sowing love and humility and empowerment and learning, if you are attached to what the reaping looks like, you actually might miss the blessings that you're getting. So if you think sowing abundance and words of abundance into another person and uplifting them into abundance means without doubt that in the next 6 months you're going to land $500,000, that can really get in the way of you receiving the abundance that is meant for you in that time, the emotional, spiritual, energetic, financial, material abundance in all forms, right? And if you could change your perspective of what the reaping has to look like, how much more willing would you be? How much more conscious would you be of sowing those positive seeds and those positive experiences into the world, trusting God to grow them into something that you could never have even imagined yourself.
Yeah, I hear this all the time with people who are like, I'm waiting for a sign. And I'm like, why are you limiting God? You know, like, oh, I'm waiting for this. And so in there, and I think like the example that people are like, this guy, he's like praying, I'm praying for God to save me. And then like this guy comes with a boat and he throws him a raft, and the guy's like, no, you can keep going, I'm waiting for God to save me. Yeah, yeah. And then like another guy comes by, and he's got like a helicopter, and he, comes down, and he tries to rescue the guy out of the ocean, and the guy's like, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And he's like, and then he, gets to heaven, and he's like, why didn't you come save me? And he's like, I threw you a life raft, a boat, a helicopter. And the guy's like, oh, And so we get this idea in our head of what it is gonna look like, and then anything else that it is remotely not that, we don't even see, because that reticular activating system is only looking to focus on that one way, right? And so that really puts limits on the abundance that is actually ready for you. And so think about that. Yeah, my mom taught me that when I was young, and I was like, oh, I'm so grateful. And I hear people say it a lot, like, I'm waiting for a sign, I'm waiting for a sign. And I'm like, I mean, I pray, and I'm like, Lord, just make it burning bush style so I don't miss it, So I'm like, it needs to be so obvious, for me. I don't care what you do, how you do it, you just do it, and make it to where I recognize it. So that way I'm fully aware, And so, yeah, I love that you shared that. So awesome.
And it is something that in a specific area in my life where I recognized I was not sowing the most positive and loving seeds was in regards to like the location that I live. I haven't allowed myself to really love where I live. And I recently had the realization that even with the shifts that I had tried to make internally, I hadn't really shifted my heart. Right? I hadn't really shifted my heart into loving where I am, like in terms, like geographically.
Yeah.
And I made that shift very recently. And what blew my mind was within 24 hours of really getting in prayer and shifting my heart to begin sowing seeds of gratitude, love, appreciation, beauty in the specific area where I am, everything started to feel different. And it was almost like this whole new perspective opened up. So it's really interesting. And I would really encourage anyone who's like watching this live or the replay to ask yourself, even if you're not externalizing seeds of negativity or judgment or resentment, within your heart, where in your life could you posture yourself differently? And where could you ask God to help you posture yourself differently? Because you don't have to do that work all alone either.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I do have like a little exercise to help you figure out kind of like where maybe a limiting belief is showing up in your reaping and sowing benefit. So you have this ability, it's our inheritance. Your inheritance is to be able to reap and sow whatever it is that you want. And it's interesting because like I was telling a friend of mine, she had gone to a dealership and like took her grandkid with her, and they had like hot cocoa, and then the granddaughter spilled the hot cocoa all over herself. And so they went into the restroom and they were trying to like kind of clean it up. And so she'd come back to the lady at the desk and was like, hey, do you happen to have like an extra shirt laying around just so I can kind of like blow dry her shirt in the dryer, or at least let it like dry off a little bit and she can wear the other shirt. And the lady like screamed and yelled at her. And and then my friend screamed and yelled back at the lady. And then was like, "Oh, like, oh my goodness. What the heck? Like, I didn't mean to say all those mean things." And so then when she was sharing the story with me, I was telling her, I'm like, yeah, you've got to be very careful because you're hundredfold soil. Meaning, whatever people sow into us because we are godly, that multiplies back or can multiply back if we allow, because God did give us free will. So we get to choose what gets reaped back. So think about that, because there's times too where people are super negative to you and you almost want to just like take it and throw it back at them like a 100-pound weighted ball, right? If that's ever happened to you.
Temptation.
Right? Yeah, you have to like really think about it, like, whoa, I can meet you where you're at. you know and but it is because
I do know how to get down there.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, I have been known to get down there. Do I want to go there? And then do I want to sow that seed? And I'll have to sit there and think about it. I'm like, ooh, do I want to sow that seed? That's not a seed I want to sow, right? And so knowing that you are that hundredfold soil, be very, very careful with what you allow planted in you and in your soil, okay? And so doing this exercise, you're going to close your eyes and I want you to reflect on an area of your life or your business where you feel that you're really not seeing the results that you hope for. And when you got that, I want you to ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation? And think for a minute, am I focused on what I've sown? Or am I frustrated by what I haven't yet reaped? This is one or the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what story are you telling yourself about your situation, whether it's life or business? And you may have one of these for each. And the interesting thing is how you show up for one thing is how you show up for everything. So more than likely, it's the same thing showing up in multiple areas of your life, because that's what happens most commonly. Are you focused on what you've sown? Go ahead.
The story that came up is it has to be hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it can't be easy. It has to be hard. You have to hustle. You have to whatever.
Yeah.
So
and that is
clearly that's focusing on the frustration.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, because that is such a common thought.
Mm-hmm.
And that literally is ingrained in our DNA exactly at the time that Adam ate the apple. That is that earth curse playing out. That is a lie from the enemy, and that earth curse playing out, and us not realizing that we have Jesus who already paid the price. Everything's already done. We just have to have the faith in order to move forward, to sow different seed, reap different harvest, right? Yeah. And so I want you to write down the narrative in one sentence. So kind of like how you were saying, I feel like I've worked so hard, or I feel like I'm working so hard, but nothing's happening fast enough, or I'm not seeing what I want to see yet. Like there's a story, there's the frustration like you mentioned, and now there's a narrative that's coming out, right? And then we want to deconstruct that frame a little bit and examine the perspective. And I want you to ask yourself, what is this belief costing me? Could be stress, could be discouraging, impatience, might be even costing you your joy, your happiness, your fulfillment.
health.
Your health, your courage. I mean, there's a cost to it, right? And then ask yourself, where might this belief be untrue or incomplete? Like anything that causes me like uneasiness in my spirit, I take it and I dissect it down this way. And this really helps me stay positive and maintain my happiness. Because if I decide, and it's my choice, because God gave me free will, right? It's my choice whether I believe the lie or not. It's your choice whether you believe the lie or not. This is, you have all the power. And so, what is the belief costing me? And where might this belief be untrue or incomplete? So if God's word promises me that he is completely working behind the scenes, even if I can't see it, he goes before me, he fights all my battles, he died on the cross for me to have everything I have ever wanted and then some, way more than I can even fathom, then is the lie true?
No. And as I wrote it down, like as I was jotting some words down as you were talking, and the big thing, like in the moments where that story is believed, it absolutely takes away the joy.
Yeah.
Right? And it's completely untrue because the majority of my life, 90% of the time, I do not believe that story. Right? So you can really take a step back and pick through, no, it's not too hard, right? At all. And there's so much joy to be had when you let it be easy.
Yeah. And in the journey, like even the learning, who cares if it's hard? Hard, easy, it doesn't matter. You get this adventure in this journey in the process, right? You get to become closer to God in this process because you have to lean into him. You have to seek his face first. So when the enemy tells you it's hard, don't do it, it's going to be uncomfortable, stay in your comfort zone, does that help you get to your blessing or does it keep you from your blessing?
It keeps you from it every time, right?
Exactly. Is that what he wants? Absolutely.
You can. One thing that came up to me when I was sitting with that is in the incomplete or untrue question that you asked is, well, it's okay to work hard for it.
Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is it doesn't have to feel like suffering.
Correct. Yeah. It can be enjoyable to work hard. Yeah. And that's a whole different narrative that we're not used to, right? Like, what? There's enjoyment in work? Like, because somewhere, somehow we believe the lie that doing work is terrible and hard and like unenjoyable. Oh no. I'm like, I love the work. I think the work is part of the adventure and the journey for me, you know, but I've changed the narrative to where it's like, yeah, I can't wait to dive into that, you know? Yeah, let's get to work, you know? And when you change the energy of it, you get more of a blessing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I say it to people all the time in therapy and in coaching, and I laugh at myself for it often, but I'll be like, so the really fun part about this is, and we're talking about, you know, like shadow work and really like digging into the wounds and healing them and dragging stuff to the surface to look at that's uncomfortable. And here I am genuinely talking about it like we're about to go to Disneyland and it's going to be a great time.
Yeah. And so, it can be. It's just the reframing of it, right? Who said that it had to be terrible? Who said that? Where'd it come from? I don't even know, right? It's probably the enemy.
Not
lie
from
absolute lie from the enemy, right? Yeah. So then reflecting on how this belief could actually be distorting your trust in God's timing, and then write down how this might be limiting your faith or your joy. And then we want to really look at God's promises, and we want to revisit the truth of sowing and reaping with the lens that God gave us, right? So we're going to meditate on this just for a minute. God's timing is never late, and every seed sown in faith will bear fruit in its due season. And so when there's times where we're like, oh my goodness, this isn't happening fast enough, right? Or why do I have to wait so long? Or this is hard, unenjoyable, I don't like it, I don't want to wait. Think about how he shows up at the right time all the time. And it's not for us so much as it is for his kingdom, right? We're here. Our purpose is to glorify God and to bring heaven down to earth, right? That is our purpose. And so when we then say, you know what, I'm trusting your timing. I know that you're never late. I know that you are at work all the time for my good. Then we can be more open to the waiting and the patience, right? It sets a different precedence for, like, okay, if somebody's gonna bless you with $10 today or $100 million in 10 years, which would you prefer?
100 million.
Correct, right? So it's like saying the same thing. Like, you can have a little bit of blessing now. It's still a blessing. $10 is still a blessing, right? Or you could have this amazing, humongous blessing in God's timing.
Mm-hmm.
Big difference, right? So we want to replace our original sentence that we had with a faith-filled statement. So we went from the, like, I feel like I've worked hard, but nothing's happening fast enough for me, to a new statement, which is, I trust that God is nurturing the seeds that I have sown, and the harvest will come in his perfect time. So just that teeny tiny little reframe shift opens you up for so much more abundance, so much more power, so much more blessing.
And as people meditate on that, I'd really encourage you to connect with the difference that you feel in your body between those two statements. Because as you anchor into your nervous system and to the physical essence of your being, you can hear God more clearly.
Yeah.
We can so quickly and easily discount the importance of the physicality of that shift, but when you feel the joy start to come back and you feel the relaxation kick in and you feel the trust in a physical sense in your body, that is the definition of embodying change. So
yeah, huge, right? And then we can anchor that in with the gratitude too.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we think about 3 things. We can write these down. 3 things that you're grateful for in this season of sowing. Even if you haven't even began to reap anything yet, like for me, I'm always grateful for the lesson. I love a good lesson, because that grows and stretches me. And most people don't like those kinds of things. Like, I hear most people say, I don't want to get uncomfortable, or that's uncomfortable for me, or that's too difficult, I don't even want to try. Not even trying keeps you stuck exactly where the enemy wants you. And if you're not growing and sowing good seed on a regular basis, you're no threat to him,
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to leave you alone. Our goal is to come and challenge him. And I love that song. It's Taryn Wells. And he's basically like, I'm coming for you, devil.
My Spotify Wrapped came in today.
Yeah.
And my #1 played song this year was Take It All Back by Taryn Wells.
And I'm coming for you. I'm storming down the gates of hell, and I'm like, we have that power. But for some reason the enemy wants you to run from him, right? But no, I'm like, no, I'm going to hunt you down, and I'm going to find you, and I'm going to take everything and then some of anything that you've even taken from me. I'm taking it all back, just like the song says. And I love that song. It's like one of my top favorites as well. And think about, like, maybe I'm grateful for the lessons that I'm learning, the patience that I'm building, because a lot of us, we don't exercise our patience, and then maybe the faith that's growing within me. So think about, how you can anchor that gratitude in 3 things that you are grateful for. And you're going to speak these out loud with conviction. Just like I did. I'm coming for you. I am growing in faith. I am exercising my patience. And I mean, like, there's times where I get very animated, and as you can tell. And so you can say it with that kind of conviction too, and that gratitude really helps to solidify the reframe, and it really helps to align your heart with what God has promised for you.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite places to get really animated like that is when I'm driving by myself.
Me too.
In the car. And you can just, like, you can be as loud and as passionate and as aggressive as you want with your words and your body. And, like, you can just really feel yourself taking your power back.
Yeah. That's funny that you said that. This morning, I went to a networking event this morning, and I'm driving in the car by myself, which I hardly ever, I work from home, so I hardly ever, I'm in the car driving. But when I worked as a nurse, I always drove about an hour to and from work. And in that time, I always listened to my music and, Christian music, and love just singing, right? So I'm driving to my networking event this morning. I've got like a tear streaming down. I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be wearing makeup by the time that I get there, because I'm like singing hallelujah at the top of my lungs. I'm choking. I'm singing so loud. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm a hot mess before I even get there. Like, what the heck? I'm going to have no voice and cried off all my makeup already, and it's like 7 a.m. And I, of course I get there and I'm like, oh, look, I still got one eye on. This is good. But don't be afraid to be bold and scream and shout at the top of your lungs, because he hears it all. One of the other songs that I like is Crowder, Because Somebody Prayed. That's another one of my, I'm like, that one just, I'm like, oh yeah, love it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so creating a daily practice for you, like, committing to maybe a daily affirmation, or even just reading what you said out loud, your anchor, reading that out loud, that gratefulness just really helps to reinforce what God has for you. God's faithful to bring the harvest in his time. And I will not grow weary in doing good. And that goes back to Galatians 6:9, where Paul is talking about let us not become weary in doing good, for the proper time we will reap the harvest if we don't give up. And so I think we're called to really faithfully trust in God and what he has done already and what he will do for all of us. And we just visualize and carry that peace with us moving forward. And that really helps to understand and learn the value of reaping and sowing. Trust and gratitude.
Thank you so much for that practice. That is so easy to apply, and such a good way to anchor back in anytime you start to feel shaky.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
Yeah. So we appreciate you being here and sharing this time with us. We would love any of your insights that you gained or gleaned from this little exercise. We have tons more of this. We do offer private coaching as well to catapult you forward on your journey to kingdom-driven success. And if that is something that you would like more information about, just comment below, and we look forward to connecting with you.
God bless everybody.